For our next session, I invite Daniel Korski to take the floor. Daniel Korski is the CEO and co-founder of Public, the world's leading GovTech incubator and accelerator, as well as the organizer of the fantastic GovTech Summit. Daniel is a former advisor to the UK Prime Minister and is bringing us the government and startups together. Let's welcome Mr. Korski to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about a power that has transformed all of our lives. The way that we buy insurance, the way that we talk to our friends, the way that we organize our journeys, whether local or far away, and how that power isn't just going to transform those kind of things, the sort of things that are about getting a pizza to you faster, but how that power is going to transform the things that really matter, how we take care of the sick, how we help our elderly, how we transform transport in a way that makes congestion less likely and the environment much cleaner. So what is that power that I'm going to talk to you about? I'm going to talk to you about how startups are going to transform public services. Because it isn't technology that has transformed absolutely everything around us. Technology has been around for a long time. Artificial intelligence, the amazing buzzword of our age. Well, people have been working on artificial intelligence for the last 20, 30 years. What I'm talking about is how small, nimble, well-capitalized companies from near and far, from the Silicon Valley in California to the northernmost reaches of Finland, to the southernmost reaches of Africa, are bringing technology, agility, and capital together into totally transforming absolutely everything around us. And how they've taken various different communities and sectors like hotels and delivery restaurants and turned them into the gig economy, and entertainment into the on-demand economy, and retail into e-commerce. And the really exciting thing is, how do we help those startups, that incredible crucible of innovation, to transform the biggest tasks around us, namely public services? Now, we all know that public services don't really have a reputation for being nimble and being flexible and being fast-moving. Of course, unless you live in Dubai. The reality is, most places, public services are incredibly slow. There's a limited risk appetite in order to adopt new kind of services. The digital skills that are required across governments in order to actually appreciate what technology can do and how to deliver something different are often not there. And then frankly, there's also often a lot of risk averseness. To what extent do we really want to risk something here? If things have been working okay for a while, shouldn't we just continue? So for a long time, government has really not been at the cutting edge of adopting new technology, and not at all at the cutting edge of adopting new technology by the smallest, most nimblest of players. But my pitch to you is that is changing, and that is changing at a very exciting rate. And it's changing because of two things. On the one hand, because of the adoption of a sort of new architectural technologies, particularly the transformation of the way we store and manage data from on-premises onto cloud. And then it's changing because of some real societal constraints. And let me now talk you through some of those. So on the one hand, we've got enormous budget constraints. And that's something we see not just in the West or in the South or in the East. It's something that we see absolutely everywhere. People want to do more for less. We've also seen over the years a succession of failures by the do-it-as-we-always-do-it kind of way. The big incumbents that got used to operating in a certain way have not really given people the sort of things that they expect. And so that's leading a lot of government officials to say, isn't there another way? They're looking across the fence, they're seeing what's happening in banking, they're seeing what's happening in retail and thinking there's got to be a way in which we can adopt some of that to deliver better services. And then frankly, there's all of you. You guys are used to Careem and Uber and Airbnb and buying things off Amazon. And it's very hard to go from that kind of experience and onto a government website and not feel, well, frankly, just a little bit disappointed at the UX, at the speed of delivery. And so there's a real kind of bottom-up pressure emerging from citizens who are saying, well, hang on, if I can do that in my private life, why can't I do that in my public life, as it were? What's even more exciting about that is as more and more younger people, many of whom are in the audience today, as you are joining public services, you are beginning to object to the dual life that you're leading The life that means that on the one hand, in your coffee break, you're on your Instagram account communicating with all your friends, but when you're actually doing your real work, it's through paper-based processes and calling people, even going to their offices in order to advance a case. You guys are objecting to that dual life, and that's putting enormous pressure on how public service is delivered. And of course, technology, as I was saying, is allowing us to do so much more. You know, rather than having to go to every house in order to figure out where problems may exist, we now can predict with a pretty good degree of accuracy what kind of households are likely to fall into what kind of problems. And that can cut extraordinary costs out of public services and also make it much easier and better, not just for those who are getting a service, but for those who are ultimately going to deliver it. And what's really exciting is we're seeing the market effect change in response to that. So a couple of examples I'd like to put up here is how the UK government, the Indian government, and the Australian government has begun to say, hang on, the way that we buy products from the market isn't really working. This long, cumbersome tender process that allows very large, slow-moving incumbents that take enormous margins on every contract. You know, the kind of process we used to operate on that does that and buys in that way, that's not really working as much for us as anymore. We need a new way of doing it, and so they have developed a whole different new way of purchasing things dynamically. And as they've done that, we've seen a number of really important symbolic successes. So I just throw up a couple here. ASI, a fantastic British startup that was able to categorize a lot of imagery online in order to flag up imagery that was considered promoting various forms of violent extremism. What was so exciting about the contract that this small startup won and was able to deploy on behalf of the Home Office in the UK was the way in which the Home Office was able to turn around to Google, who'd been telling them that actually they couldn't really do any of that kind of work. And the small startup with 3 people or 5 people in a small basement was able to act nimbly and in an agile fashion in order to show what could be done, allowing, of course, further pressure to be put on the much bigger provider. It's a great example. Now my slide presentation has said that technology working, brilliant. Adzuna, another great company. It was a massive provider in the government in the UK that was offering a jobs platform for job seekers. It'd been running for years and years by an enormous incumbent. And that wasn't really investing in the technology, wasn't really thinking about how the new things that were emerging in the market, such as how to predict where people might want to seek jobs, how to tell them what kind of skills they might want to develop. But this small little nimble startup was able to do that and was able to dislodge this large incumbent. And those are just 2 of many other examples that we're seeing of small players that are able to kind of edge their way in and transform the way services are delivered. Well, you might say, that's all fine and well, but haven't we heard this story before? I mean, we've been digitizing public services in many ways since the 1950s, and the introduction of computing power, in government services isn't something new. But I do think we're facing a very new era. And I kind of want to put up this slide in order to explain how to think smartly about digital government, how we have gone from what I call government IT, which was about large vendors and multi-programs and all the big names that you've heard of, the IBMs and the Oracles of this world. How we moved from that towards a kind of era of e-government, which was much more public-facing. The initial websites emerged, so public services began to emulate the private sector and put websites up. We then moved to an era of digital government, which was much more about the consumer, the front-of-house focus. And inside government, small agile teams were emerging in order to deliver services. But I think we're now moving into this new era of GovTech, where we're seeing innovation across the piece. And a lot of the innovation isn't being done in-house and isn't being done by large incumbents, but in a really interesting interplay between small agile teams outside, namely in the startups, and really perspicacious, far-sighted internal teams, many of which we see examples of here in the region. So what is it, this era of GovTech? Why is it so different? What are the ways in which it is different than what we've seen before? And I want to put to you that it's different in these kind of ways. It is transformative rather than just seeking to make 1 or 2 small efficiency gains. It is in-depth. It's going deeper into the nature of public services. It's ubiquitous. It isn't just in one part of government, but it's kind of spreading elsewhere. And really excitingly, it's expert-driven. And I want to come to each one of these in turn. So the new era of GovTech is, to me, very ubiquitous. What started out as conversations in one place or another, for example, in cabinet offices of prime ministers, is now beginning to spread out, and people across government departments are emerging saying, you know what, I'm in charge of this little thing, and I just know that it can be done differently. I see how things are changing in my own life. I know it can change in my work life. And I have 3 great examples that I wanted to put up. Novoville, which is a Greek startup that has totally transformed the way that the Athens government communicates with its citizens. And on the basis of that experience has scaled not just into lots of other places in Greece, but into Italy, Switzerland, and the UK. And Goodbox, something totally different, a company that is digitizing the way that charitable giving takes place, not just so you can walk up and tap with your credit card, and you can do it on WeChat, but also so you can have a much different kind of ongoing relationship with some of the charitable foundations you might want to give money to, which in turn is totally transforming the relationship that people might have with that charitable organization, the data that's collected, and some of the opportunities that may exist for further communication between giver and deliverer. So it's becoming really ubiquitous, and that's what I think is so exciting about this era. It's also going really deep. You know, as I said to you, the first part of, the first sort of stages of digitization of public services was really not very deep. It was about transforming, you know, the 25 digital processes that most people, the 25 digital services that people use. It was all about transforming those online. But it wasn't really about going deep. It wasn't really about changing the infrastructure. It wasn't really about merging data sets. It wasn't really about trying to predict how citizens demand services. And I think the change that's happening now is people going much deeper. And a couple of the companies that are operating on this, I gave you the example of ASI. Harbor is another fantastic, interesting startup that is able to bring an enormous array of complex data sets together in a very simple dashboard so that policymakers suddenly can have an overview in a fundamentally different way about the pace and change of public services. The third thing I want to mention is that it is transformative. And what I mean by that is, it isn't just making an existing service better, cheaper. It's bringing a new service altogether to the market. So take a company like Valorant. Valorant makes smart studs in the road, which are very different than the kind of studs that we've seen normally. Normally, you know, we have studs that signal whether there's a queue, maybe they just flash up when you have to kind of drive to one side or the other. But the reality is the road operator doesn't have an intelligent conversation with the road. There is no such conversation, and there are no services on the back of that. Valorant has created a series of studs that at a very cheap price point can create a censored road. And what's really exciting about that is that most of the conversations we see around the world about autonomous vehicles really put the highway operator, and then by extension the government, in quite a passive role. Like the autonomous car will happen to you. You know, you're just sort of waiting for it to happen to you. But this actually puts government in a fundamentally different position. And it's creating a potential for a new set of services, a new set of public services that just didn't exist before. Citymapper is another really interesting example. You know, I don't know if you guys have been traveling to cities where Citymapper operates, but there's an ability when you use the Citymapper app to transport yourself across the city in a fundamentally different way than just using Google Maps. And the company that started kind of creating a competitor map to Google Map is now actually putting on various different transport services based on what they can see the demand is on their app. And that's a great example of a new sort of service that's emerging that didn't exist before. So to me, what is so exciting is that we're also looking at a very transformative part of this era. Then there's the expert part. What we're seeing more and more are people coming out of public services with a frustration and a problem, and they go off to fix it. And now they can. It's the doctor that's saying, you know what, I've been performing that surgery for a long time. I see some in the audience as an example. I've been performing this surgery for years and years, and I know what is wrong, and I also know what to fix it, and I don't want to go through a long procurement process with an enormous company in order to be told 6 months from now or 2 years from now that if I spend another 50 million, I can get to the answer. I know I can get to the answer now, and I know there'll be a market for it. Now, we see a lot of that in healthcare, but it's not only healthcare. We see it across policing. So a good example, Caseware, is a company built by 3 former FBI analysts who grew frustrated with the enormously slow and cumbersome case management system that the FBI developed, and said, no, we can build a better case management system. And they went off and they did it. Carbine is another great example of some police officers that realized that most people, when they call 911, when they call the emergency services, what do? What do they want to hold up? What do they want to show? They've seen something, what do they want to do? They want to turn their phone on and they want to stream the video. Some guy's attacking somebody, a lorry's turned over. So what do you do with that feed? You can't do anything with it. You can't call the police and say, I've got X amount of data that I'd like to transport to you. By the way, I'd like to do it online. These guys realized, while listening to calls coming in, that the best thing they could do was create a system where you can call the emergency services, switch on the phone, and while you're talking to them, film, and it automatically streams to the emergency services, and they can see and they can gather data from many other people showing videos. So it's a fantastic example of somebody sitting there realizing the problem was happening, finding no solution in the market, and realizing, you know what, we can do something about it. We can build it. There are countless examples. I could go on. The other thing that's really interesting about this market is that the market itself is becoming actively involved. And I put up here a couple of different brand names of organizations that are government organizations. GovTech Polska, the Polish government's GovTech organization. CivTech, the Scottish government's organization. The Dubai Future Accelerators you're familiar with here. The GovTech Catalyst in the UK. This is the government saying, we actually want to involve ourselves in the market in a fundamentally different way. We don't just want to say, we have a problem, market, tell us, can you solve it? We want to be actively out there engendering a different sort of market, because we believe that if we bring our solutions closer to that market, new and different kind of players will emerge in order to deliver solutions. Hopefully cheaper, but ideally even better. So how big is this opportunity? We did some calculations in the UK, and we think that this could probably be something like a £20 billion opportunity just in the UK over the next couple of years. And if you look globally, in the Middle East or beyond, this is a transformative opportunity, which is probably something around a 400 billion now, and could probably grow even larger. Now, I've been standing on this stage talking to you about this extraordinary potential, and a potential that I'm very excited about, but we should also be honest. It still isn't so easy to work with governments. We did a survey of thousands of startups that had tried or are working with government, asking them what they thought, and we did it in the UK, we did it in Denmark, we did it in France. 93% said it wasn't very easy to work with government, and 89% said that they preferred to work with the private sector. So there's no doubt government has a long way to go before it can become the kind of market that easily adopts startup innovation. And the reality is also that what governments spend today on startup innovation compared to what they spend on digital transformation by large incumbents is also very different. So I wanted to show you just this figure to illustrate that the UK spends something like 3.2 billion on government transformation. That's your big blob. And spends a tiny 20 million. Now 20 million is good money if you're a startup. My God, you can build an MVP, for 100,000, for 200,000. 20 million sounds amazing. But if it's compared to 3 billion, it shows what kind of disparity we're still talking about between the old school, slow-moving, incumbent way of working and the nimble, exciting, and dynamic way of working. So what are some of the other challenges we have to overcome? Government remains very risk-averse. Ooh, can we really work with that startup? Do they really have money enough in order to continue that, contract that we've got? What about money? Talking about that, are they going to get enough venture capital? The reality is a lot of venture capitalists, unlike us, are really worried about this market. Is this really going to give us the kind of return that we need? Of course, the reality is that a lot of the big incumbents are so financially geared that they're much more financially risky than some of the smaller players. But it's about the mindset. The mindset isn't there yet to appreciate the extent to which small and well-capitalized companies can deliver things much cheaper and actually remain very robust. There's still also a lot of lock-in of existing suppliers. I have lost count of the many conversations I've had with somebody who said, I would love to give this contract to a startup, but I'm just in a 20-year deal that I just signed with large incumbent X or large incumbent Y. And the truth is also that on the startup side, companies that are fresh out of the incubation process don't necessarily know how to work with governments. the tendering process can be very complex for them. How do you fill all this out? And by the way, if we win, who's going to take my IP? Can I protect it? Can I sell it elsewhere? What's government going to do? So startups don't really always put themselves in the best of positions in order to transform public services. So that's why we created Public. Public is the business that I built in the UK, France, Germany, and Denmark. And what we do is we do the ABC. We try to accelerate existing startups, try to get them ready for the market. We build their technology, we give them funding, we give them support, we introduce them to people. And where we see opportunities where no startup exists, but there is something exciting to do, we build companies from scratch, we incubate them, we bring founding team together, and we try as best as we can to seize the opportunity that might be there. And finally, we do the C, we convene the market. We bring people together in a way that you try to also hear. But what we do is we bring all the startups that wear the t-shirts next to all the suited guys and girls that run the contracts. And we try to create a different sort of engagement with people. And after having done this for 2 years, we're probably now the largest investor in GovTech, and I just wanted to show you the extraordinary array of companies. They do everything from remove bias in public sector recruitment practices to help offenders out of prison and how to help them on the journey of their recovery to dealing with social care problems in the health sector. So there's an enormous array of opportunities out there. There's a new era emerging, and the power that has transformed every part of our life, insurance, as I mentioned, and travel, is about to transform probably the most important part of the service economy, namely public services. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you'll get in touch if you've got a great idea, and I can help you transform your ideas into better public services. Thank you very much. I'm going to just jump off script here. I'm meant to be going off stage, and I will in a second. But I'm going to open it up for a quick Q&A. You're going to have to shout out because we don't have microphones in the audience. Does anybody want to ask anything following this call? We would love to work in Africa. I will come and find you. Find me. So Africa, there's one. Who's going to offer another country than continent than Africa? Madam. Dubai. Madam, you wanted to speak.
What do you recommend for startups that want to work with the government but don't have the ability to reach the government?
So what kind of startup are you thinking about?
No, I actually do have a startup with a friend. It's more of a scientific-based startup, but it's hard for us to reach.
It's hard to start the conversation. Yeah. Right. Who works from government here? I want a show of hands. Come on. All right. You, sir. You, sir. Could you please have a conversation with this lady? You, sir, please put your hand up. I saw you. Come on. It's this gentleman here. This gentleman here, he's going to help you, okay? Is that okay? Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yeah. Sir.
What is your business model?
So our business model, we take equity in the startups and in the hope that over time, as they get contracts, they either IPO, they get sold, or of course there's a dividend play. So we are a venture model. Well, look, thank you very much. Get in touch on Twitter, LinkedIn, or via email. I really hope to hear from you. Thank you very much.